Hello, hello. I guess you are here because you are curious to know how much money do two apartments in Switzerland make in 5 years. So that's about the title of the video. Um, so yeah, we are going to see in detail, in quite a bit of detail, how much money do two apartments in Switzerland make. If you don't know why I'm talking about this, you can go into the description. There you will see two videos where I talk about when we bought these two apartments. One, we bought it in 2019 in a small city, a small municipality in Ticino, near Locarno. And the other one, we bought it actually in Locarno, which is quite a big city for the standards of Switzerland. And then that we bought in 20, 2020, 2021, 2021. So from there, so 2019 to 2023, we have 5 years. So we are going to check out how much money they made, what are the returns on the investment. Why 2023, but we are already mid 2024? Simply because when I do the accounting, I still have many documents which only come around May and June. Plus, there are also the taxes to wait for, and I have to wait for the official decision of the taxes to be able to implement them into the expenses. If you don't know how it works, basically, these are two apartments that my parents bought, but I manage the whole thing. So I manage all of the finances, I manage the necessary repairs, I talk with the stakeholders. So yeah, basically my parents don't do anything. I take care of both the apartments. There is not much to take care of, honestly. When it comes to work, mainly what you have to do is, well, first of all, find the tenant. That's quite a bit of work. We will see in 2021 because there are a lot of expenses, even though we bought the apartment in May, but I will talk about it later. Yeah, so basically you have to find a tenant that you can also ask for an external company, which is what we did in 2021 with the second apartment, but with the first apartment, we found it ourselves. And then once a year, you have to check the whole accounting that that basically the administration of the apartment does, and then you have to go to the meeting, general meeting of the whole apartment, and that's about it. You have to make some decisions on whether or not they should spend money. For example, in 2024, so this year, we are going to spend money for the ampliation of the solar panel system in one of the two apartments. Let's check out each year, and I will go through a little bit of the expenses and the reasons why behind some numbers. So what you see here is the balance sheet, and then we are going to also check out the income statement. I will not go through the whole journal because it's very long, and also I tend to sum up a lot of the expenses. I do the accounting only once a year, and I put as all of the expenses incurred the last day of the year. I don't stay there and analyze and do the entries every time they come up because it's easier this way. A lot of the expenses that we have are expenses for the entire apartment building. That means that the administration of the apartment takes care of the accounting, and then I get at the end of the year, or mid-year actually, of the next year, I get the finance balance, how much we spent, and that's basically it. So there is not much that I have to do. But okay, let's go from the start. So when it go, maybe let's go into the income statement first. Gross rents in 2019, it was only 4,400 francs. Gross rents, they include the net rent, so that's basically our gross profit. The actual profit that we get is the net rent. On top of that, we also charge an advance payment on operating expenses. So those are general expenses that the tenant has to pay, for example, water, for example, heating. Electricity, they get a separate bill directly from the electrical company, sorry. And then there is also, I think, maintenance of the building, and that's about it. More or less, that's about it. In some part of the insurance, like I think 5% of the insurance they have to pay. Other expenses like insurance, again, of course, taxes, and then at the administration fees, Those are expenses that we have to sustain. So inside the gross rents, you have the expenses that the tenant has to pay plus the net rent. That's why it also varies each year, because the expenses vary. The net rent doesn't vary that much. We increase the rents only in 2024. So here you don't see any increase in rent. Other income. Other income is our administrative expenses that we charge to the tenant. We can charge a certain percentage of the operating expenses that the tenant has to pay. We can charge them as our administrative expenses. Then operating expenses, those are those that I was talking about. A part of this is paid by us, a small part actually, and that the majority is paid by the tenant. Of course, in the contract, it's written what we have to pay, what the tenant has to pay. But essentially, I sum up everything and then I pretend as if we pay all of the operating expenses and we just receive this gross rent because it's easier that way. So this is basically the gross rent, as I said. Other income, it adds to the gross rents, and then we have the operating expenses. The gross income, sorry, not the net income. The gross income is therefore 4,000. It was so low in 2019 simply because we bought the apartment in September 2019 and we rented it out starting in September, I think mid-September, something like that. Therefore, it's not for a full year. This apartment is rented out with a net rent of 14,400 francs per year, divided into 12 payments, so the 12 months. Other expenses that we incurred that year were 5,800. Those are basically the lawyer, so the expenses for the lawyer to do all the papers. And yeah, as you can see, they don't even match the income that we received, but that's perfectly okay. Therefore, a operating income of 1,774 francs, a negative 1,774 francs. When it comes to the interests are these ones, 733 francs. Interest is basically calculated on this amount of borrowed money, and each year it goes down. So in Switzerland, you have two mortgages. When you buy a house, you get two mortgages. One is a mortgage that you usually don't pay off, which is maximum 66% of the whole value of the apartment. And the other one is the mortgage that you do pay off, and that's 33% of the value of the apartment minus the minimum 20% down payment that you have to give. We gave more than 20% as a down payment. We gave this much, 100,000 francs. But all of these informations, you can find them in a video that I will link in the description, where I explain how to buy an apartment in Switzerland and all the considerations that you have to make to buy an apartment in Switzerland. But yeah, those are the interests. Of course, not for the full year, because again, we bought the apartment in September. That means those are the interests from September until December. So we have an income before taxes of 2,500 minus 2,500 francs, sorry. And then we have the taxes. Now, when you calculate the taxes in Switzerland for the apartments, you can only deduct the interests, so these ones, and then on top of that you can also deduct 10% of your net rents. If you want to deduct more than 10% of the net rents, you have to explain all of the expenses that you incurred. And if I'm not mistaken, I read the law about taxations to understand what we could have deducted. You cannot deduct the expenses for the lawyer. Those you can deduct them if you sell the apartments. So in Switzerland, we don't have capital gain taxes, but there is an exception, and those are apartments or houses. When you sell your apartment or your house, if you make a profit, you will have to pay a certain amount of taxes on that profit. But of course, you can deduct the expenses that you incurred into buying that apartment and all the expenses that you incurred into increasing the value of your apartment, because those are not expenses that you can deduct from the income that the apartment generates you. And by the way, an apartment will generate taxable income even if you don't rent it out. That's a way to tax your apartment. So they make a fake income, which is about 70% of the real income that you would generate if you rented it out. And on top of that, you pay income taxes. But when you sell the apartment, you can deduct all of the expenses that you incurred to increase the value of your apartment, or to buy your apartment, or to sell your apartment as well. So that's about it. Nonetheless, my point was that these are only the municipality taxes, but that year I didn't do all of the calculations to understand how many taxes were generated because of the apartment. I don't know why I didn't do it. I think I just didn't. I didn't want to. Well, we were still clarifying with my parents how we were going to go about with the taxes, because it's not like you have a separate tax. All of the income that you get from the net rents goes into your income, and then on that you have taxes, and you pay federal taxes, cantonal taxes, and then municipality taxes. Municipality taxes, you pay based on where you generated that income. So for the apartment in Verso, we only pay income tax in Verso. But for example, for the cantonal and federal, you have to divide them, and you have to take into consideration how much income you had because my parents worked, and then you have to account for how much money the main apartment where they live generated. And also we have another house outside of Switzerland, and you also have to take into consideration that even though on that one you don't pay income taxes, the income generated from that is only used to calculate the income that it's used to calculate the marginal tax bracket. Very complicated. Maybe one day, if you want, I will do a video on taxes. But anyways, 48 francs of taxes, which generated a net income of negative 2,554 francs. And that's why here we have a liquid cash of negative 2,500. It's negative, the liquid cash, because this is a theoretical cash. So my parents invested on 100,000 francs. That's their investment. And that means that this year, the apartment business had a debt towards my parents of 2,500 francs. Then in reality, there is no bank account with this amount of money in, because it's all mixed. Not really much mixed, but it's a bit mixed. I generally sum up everything, which means return on the net worth at the end of the year of negative 2.62%, or return on the net worth at the start of the year of negative 2.55%. The net worth at the start of the year, it's this one, 100K, which is what they invested. And then net worth at the end of the year, it's this one. Let's go now to the second year, where we had the full income from the apartment in Verso. We have gross rent of 15,500. Inside here, we have the operating expenses. Then we have the net rent of 14,400 francs. Other income, we don't have any other income. For that year, we didn't charge any expenses. And then we have a gross income of 13,600. From these expenses, basically, that you see here, operating expenses, those are the expenses that the administration will give you at the end of the period. So they will just give you a report where you can see how much operating expenses you had. And then you yourself have to divide between what are the expenses that I have to charge to the tenant and what are the expenses that I have to sustain. Then the tenant usually gives you an advance payment. You can discount that advance payment, and then if there is some money that you still have to collect, you send out the invoice. Other expenses, we didn't incur any other expenses, fortunately. Operating income is therefore equal to the gross income. And then we have interests on this amount of money, which is this one, 273,000 francs, of about 2,600 francs. And then we have income before taxes of 11,000, and then taxes of 1,200. Again, taxes are not calculated on this income. Be careful. They are calculated on net rent, minus interest, minus 10% of net rent. So I do a separate report for my parents so that they can use that report to pay taxes. So they just input the numbers that I give them, and then they pay the taxes with that. So at the end of the day, a net income of 9,800 800 francs, which resulted in a return on the net worth at the end of the year of 9.13%, or a return on the net worth at the start of the year of about 10%. Usually, I would look at this one. 10%. This one is a bit to stay more conservative with the numbers. But yeah, 10% is the return on the income that we had at the start of on the net worth that we had at the start of the year before we generated this income here. The return is always calculated on the net worth and not on the amount invested, simply because my parents have to keep this amount of money in the business because, well, they will incur some expenses throughout the year. Also, they might incur expenses that then the tenant will have to pay back, but they have to anticipate. So it's really important to keep a cushion of some amount of money into the bank account. And that's why we calculate the return on that money, because it's not like my parents can take that money and invest it somewhere else. In addition to that, my parents would not invest in something else. So they don't have investments other than these two apartments. And therefore, they would not use that money anyways. So that's why I stick to that number. If you want to calculate yourself other numbers, you have the income here and you have the amount invested. So you can simply use those numbers to calculate the income on the return on the investment. Then we go to 2021. 2021, it's where the apartment in Locarno comes up. So we buy another apartment. Both are one-bedroom apartments. And so when we buy the apartment, by the way, at the end of 2020, because of this 9,800, we go into a positive bank account. But then we buy the apartment in 2021 with this much down payment, 112,000, and that generates us a little bit more income. Again, we bought the apartment in May, but we could not find any tenant until December. The problem was, first of all, we tried to rent it out ourselves, just like we did for Verso, because we thought, well, maybe it goes well again, and we find the tenant very soon, but it didn't work out really well. So we asked for help to an external company, which rented out the apartment for us, and it took them, I think, about 3 months or 2 months to rent it out, or even less, maybe. Yeah, I would say about 2 months. So 3 months we spent wasted on trying to find it. Then we got stressed. We didn't have time to go and check out the apartments. People were calling and then not showing up. So it was really a bit awful. So then we asked for help to this company. The company, I think, asked us, I think, 1 month of rent, 1 month of gross rent, or two, about 1 or 2 months of gross rent. And that's basically included into here. So we have the gross rent of 17,000, which is the apartment in Verso plus the month of December for the apartment in Locarno. And then we have other income, which are again our own expenses that we charge to the tenant. And then we have operating expenses of 4,000 francs, which is again all of the expenses that we had to incur. This is, of course, both the apartment in Verso and the apartment in Locarno, because the apartment in Verso started in May, and it doesn't matter if you have or not a tenant. You will have to pay operating expenses anyways. So the maintenance, you have to pay it. Doesn't matter if there is a tenant or not. If there is a tenant, you can charge it back to the tenant. If there is no tenant, you have to charge it. You cannot charge the full amount of the year if you rented out the apartment in December. From May to December, we have to pay it, of course. So that resulted us in a gross income of 13,000 francs, and then other expenses of 13,700 francs. And then, of course, these 13,700 francs were the expenses to rent out the apartment and the expenses for the lawyer to do all the paperwork to sell the apartment, to buy the apartment, sorry. Why is it much more than Verso? First of all, again, as I said, there is inside, I think, 1 or 2 months worth of rent because of the company that we hired to rent out the apartment, and because for Verso we had an agreement where the seller would pay half of the expenses for the lawyer. In Locarno, we didn't have that agreement. Unfortunately, we wanted to ask for it to have a bit of a discount. We couldn't, so they didn't accept. So yeah, that's why we have that amount of expenses. When it comes to operating income, therefore, we have a negative 660 franc. And on top of that, we have an interest of 5,000 and something francs, because again, you have to pay interest from May to December. Doesn't matter if you have a tenant or not, the bank wants the interest, and that it's on you if you can offset it with the rent or not. So at the end of the day, we have an income before taxes of about 5,800 francs, sorry, negative 5,800 francs, and then taxes of 761. Why do we pay taxes even though we had a negative income? Simply because you have to calculate the taxes on the net rent minus 10%, which they give you as a standard, minus 10% of the net rent, minus the interest. But in this case, because for Locarno, the 10% of the net income, sorry, the net rent was lower than what we paid to rent out the apartment, so what we paid to the external company to rent out the apartment, we could use the expenses that we incurred to rent out the apartment as a deductible. So in reality, in Locarno, we were able to put a negative income, but then again, it was not enough to offset completely the income from Verso. And so at the end of the day, a net income for the taxes for the apartments were positive and generated 761 francs in taxes. Again, because you cannot deduct the expenses for the lawyer. Those are deducted when you sell the apartment. So again, also on this note, you keep track of how much you spend to buy the apartment because those are expenses that you have to offset. I think, at least I think, I didn't still study the law on how to sell the apartments because I don't care too much right now because we are not going to sell these apartments. Overall, this generated a net income of negative 6,500 francs, which again gave us a negative return on net worth at the end of the year of 309% or at the start of the year of negative 3%. So we have a negative first year, positive second year, and a negative third year. Here, then we went back into the negative bank account. That means that the apartment business had a debt towards my parents of about 7,000 francs. The value of the apartments increased, of course, because we bought the other apartment, but also the liabilities increased to about 600,000 francs. So those are the debts that we have. But yeah, that's about it. The net worth was at the end of the 2021 of about 200,000 francs. Now let's go to the first 2021. That's the first year after we bought both apartments, where we have a gross rent of 33,000 francs. Of course, this includes 15,200 francs of net rent from Locarno and 14,400 francs of net rent from Verso, plus all the operating expenses that are charged to the tenant. And then we have other income of 476 francs. Why is it that high now? Well, this includes also solar panels that we have on the apartment of Verso. There we have solar panels which generate current that we sell to the grid, and that generates about 480 francs. I cannot tell you how much it costed us this solar panel system because it was already included in the apartment, but for the previous years it was basically given directly back to the tenant. So the tenant got a lower electrical bill, but then from 2021 we keep that profit. And then from 2024, the tenant will get back that electricity, but now they have to buy it from us, buy it at a lower price as the grid. So they get an advantage, but we also get the advantage of having invested into the solar system. That generated a gross income of about 28,000 francs. Fortunately, in 2022, we didn't incur any other expenses. And then we have an operating income of 28,000 francs, which is, again, the same as the gross income, interest of 6,400 francs, an income before taxes of 22,000 francs, taxes of about 3,000 francs, and then a net income of about 19,000 francs. All in all, this generated a net worth, a return on the net worth at the end of the year of 8.3%, or a return on the net worth at the start of the year of about 9%. Then, if we go to 2023, we get something in addition. First of all, when we go to the balance sheet, we have cash for maintenance. This is basically cash that we have to pay. This is only for Verso. We have to pay uh, to the apartment building, basically. There they have a bank account where they keep some money for maintenance, so that we don't have to then give out too much money when there is a problem, a maintenance problem, or an improvement that they want to do. For example, in 2024, we will improve our solar system. A part of the money needed for the solar system will come out of the cash for maintenance account. The apartment's value keeps the same. By the way, the apartment's value is kept the same simply because I don't want to stay there and update the amount of the value of the apartment. I don't care too much about it. Again, we don't want to sell the apartment, so the apartment really is there only to generate us the income. So we just keep it like that. When we go to the debt, of course, the debt starts to decrease each and every year, because again, the first mortgage, that's the one that you have to pay off, and it's gonna take us about 10 12 years to pay off that mortgage. And then the other part of the mortgage, we will just keep it and continue to pay interest. Then of course, if you prefer, you can pay it down, but I don't think we will. When the time comes, I will do an analysis, but for now, I think we will keep it. Then let's go down to understand this net income. So this net income comes from gross rents of 33,323 francs, basically the same as 2022, again, because we didn't increase the rents. Other income, again, the solar panels of 480 francs. Operating expenses, about the same, 5,000 francs. Gross income, therefore, it's about the same, 28,700 francs. And then we get to all the other expenses. Other expenses is an improvement that we did, and this is basically the charging station for electrical vehicles. So our tenant in Verso wanted to buy an electrical car, but we didn't have the charging station for it. Therefore, he asked us if we could buy him the electrical charging station, and we said, of course, yes. Clearly, this expense is not, it's not for the tenant. The tenant does not have to pay for the charging station. That's our own investment into the property, so we have to pay it. It was about 3,000 francs, and then we got some incentives from the canton, therefore it's a bit less than 3,000 francs. And then in here we also have expenses that we had to pay for the insurance, because we got a storm. I don't know how it's called, but basically ice balls fell and that damaged the facade of the building, and we had to redo the facade. Of course, there is insurance, so the insurance pays, but there is a co-payment. So we had to pay, I think, all in all, for the entire apartment building, about 1,000 francs. So there is a portion that it's paid by us, of course, and that goes into other expenses. Again, that's not paid by the tenant. That's paid by us. That's our own risk. Therefore, operating income of about 26,000 francs. Interest, fairly the same. Again, a bit less because we pay down the debt. So that's 6,290 francs. That generated us an income before taxes of 19,000 francs. And then we have a lot of taxes. Now, this year, the taxes are not double, but 2,000 francs more than last year, simply because my parents this year generated a lot of income from employment, and that increased dramatically our tax bracket. And because I don't calculate a separate tax bracket for the apartments, but we contribute equally to the amount of taxes that we have to pay, the apartment had to pay about 5,000 francs, despite the income before taxes being actually less. But yeah, overall that generated a net income of almost 15,000 francs, or a return on net worth at the end of the year of about 6%, or a return on net worth at the start of the year of about 6.3%. Next year, we are expecting to get something similar to 2022 because other expenses we should not get. In Locarno, we had the same problem with the facade, but the insurance took a very long time before they could estimate all the costs and decide how much money they would pay and all of that. Fortunately, they pay everything that they have to, but we have a co-payment of 10,000 francs for the entire apartment building, which generates a payment for us of 500 francs. Actually, that includes also an improvement that we want to do on the apartments. So we will have other expenses of about for 500 francs. I'm still not sure if I will include it here or here, because if I include it here, then I have to deduct it from what the administration gives to me. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, the net income will be the same. Yeah, apart from that, we are not expecting any more expenses. Oh, yeah, no, we are expecting a 1,000 franc expenses for the fridge because in Verso the fridge broke. So we had to pay it. Again, the tenant doesn't pay. The tenant pays only up to 200 francs, but not as a co-payment. So if something breaks and it's less than 200 francs, then it's on the tenant. It's called a small maintenance. It's up to 200 francs that it's paid by the tenant. On top of that, then there are all other maintenance stuff like fridge breaking, which we pay, and that's about 1,000 francs. Fortunately, we gave everything to a separate company, which brings in the fridge, mounts the fridge, connects it to the electricity, and then takes away the old fridge and does basically everything. We didn't even go to the apartment, so that's perfect. And yeah, that's about it. The only case in which the tenant has to pay something is when they make a damage, or let's say on purpose or because they are negligent. There they have an insurance. When you rent out an apartment, it's very important that you check if they have an insurance. It's called private liability insurance. In that case, that insurance from the tenant would pay. So yeah, you just ask the tenant to pay and then they should pay. If they don't pay, either they don't get their repair, it's fine, or you can sue them. So it's also good to have a private lawyer's insurance. We also have that. It's not in the apartment because my parents did it on their own. It just that also helps for the apartments. So overall, what I wanted to calculate is the average return, which I would say it's this plus sorry minus this one plus this one minus this one over 5 years. So that's almost 4% return, considering the costs for the lawyers, which is very, very good. It's much more than you can get if you invest in Swiss bonds. It's 4 times more. It's less, of course, than what you could get from the stock market. That's clearly the case, simply because it's much more stable. But because the high costs of buying the apartments are not incurred every year and they are only incurred once, it's clear that as the time comes, then the apartments will start to amortize this first expense that you have to incur, and then they will start to actually generate a lot of bigger returns on the net worth. Of course, again, the net worth increases every year, therefore also the return will diminish, but we are generally speaking about 4 to 6, 7% yearly average return. Um, this also depends highly on the interest. We have a very low interest on these apartments, but I calculated that we could afford up to 5% interest, which in that case would mean that we get to a net income of zero, which is still okay. It's a very worst case scenario. I tried to calculate what would have happened if we had a interest rate as we had it a couple of months ago in Switzerland, where we reached 3% interest rates for 10-year mortgages, and that would simply mean that we have a net income of about 5,000 francs, considering also that we would have a discount on taxes because the interest can be deducted from the net rents. But yeah, this is about it. Overall, all of the apartments generated in 5 years a cash of about 14,500 francs, So in 5 years, with investment of 212,000 francs, we generated about 14,500 francs. So yeah, that I would say it's what you could maybe expect. It highly depends on where you buy an apartment. If you buy it in Zurich, it costs a lot more. It's true that the rents are higher, but it costs a lot more to buy an apartment. But yeah, so it really fluctuates. In Tessin, also it's risky to buy an apartment because there are many apartments for rent, and you're never sure if you're going to rent it out. So yeah, that's about it. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'm sure I will try to answer them, and I hope I will be able to. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you guys in the next video.